That's good. Okay. Let's take another breath. Let's take one more. We pause in this moment to center down. We pause to reawaken the truth within us. We pause to remember. It's already remembered. It's already put together. We remember. We come here to go back to the beginning. Our creation of the beloved community is not so much a moving forward, but going back to our most natural state. We're retrofitting the foundation. You can't keep building on to a house. You can't put a 6-story on a house built for a 1-story. Oh no. We need a bigger base. You can't put new wine into old skins. The new wine is effervescent. The new wine is expansive. The truth is inclusive. The old skins are already worn out. They can't handle more expansion. We need new skin. We come here to be the skin. We come here to be the new foundation. So in this moment right now, we just release guilt, shame, blame, doubt, worry, fear, anxieties, expectations, agendas, timetables. We just lay them down. We're not even so much here to listen to each other as we are to just simply listen. For I know that Spirit is revealing something new and fresh. We receive. We are grateful to be here for such a time as this. So we get out of the way, we allow it to be, and so it is.
And so it is.
All right. Are those that window open over there?
Would you like it open?
Yeah. Okay. Very good. So one of the things that I asked you to do last week was to take a look at the book Conflict Resolution in your deepest, in the Sacred Yes. So I'd like to start off with a little bit of that, but first, let's do a bit of a check-in, okay? I'm not sure how many people we have with us online or on the telephones. Okay. So I would like for 3 people in the room to share a vision that you hold that's bringing you here to do this work. 3 people in the room. Okay, your name and what it is you're doing.
I'm Milo, and I am absolutely holding a vision of social oneness, and it's a really big vision, and stepping into it is exciting and scary at the same time. And I stand on the authority of being a co-creator with God in this sacred mission.
All right. Yes.
My name is Kim, and I have a vision of oneness, that all beings come to state of awakening where they realize that there is just one, and that there is no God, that it's just us. We're all a big family, and we're all in this together.
Very good.
My name is Emma. I have a vision of oneness and also of love and peace all over the world. That's my vision. That we all come together as one, loving each other.
Very good. All right. We're going to start with a quote out of the book, The Sacred Yes, the letter Conflict Resolution. We're going to go over the last two sections, sections 6 and 7, beginning on page 263. The Sacred Yes. These are part of the Letters from the Infinite series that I had the privilege of downloading and putting into the form of a couple of books. So this is the end of the letter, and I invite everybody to read the first part of the letter, but this is the end of the letter. It says, too often you feel like you don't know what to do because you don't understand all of the issues at hand. You don't have to understand all of the issues at hand. You just have to understand that there is only one of us here. You just have to understand that I am the only thing that is. You just have to understand that deeply enough to be willing to start with it as your premise. If you start with this as your premise, then you will know what to do. It will become self-evident. Why? Because I will tell you. Why? Because you will be listening to me. Why? Because the truth is self-evident and does not need to be proved. Point your eyes towards the truth. Take the money and the time that you are using to build weapons and defenses and use them to build bridges, literally and figuratively. Take all the effort that you are making to try to make the world safe and use it to make the world more inclusive. You will never be safe as long as in your safety you are creating a circumstance that makes someone else unsafe. Because I never manifest in the particular. What you desire for yourself, you must desire for all people, or you will never really manifest it. If you are unwilling to have other people experience the good that you want for yourself, then you are creating the block to your own selves being able to receive it. You can't shut down in the particular. You can't say no and resist in the particular. You can't say no to their winning and yes to yours, because the no's always cancel out the yeses. They energetically negate them. So, my children, the message here is to open up your hearts, to open up your minds, to be willing to grow and expand, to be willing to love and embody and embrace, to move beyond the false notions that there are individual or antagonistic energy forces that you have to hedge or protect yourself against, and to start with the oneness of everybody and everything. If you will start with the oneness, then your whole perception of the so-called problem will change. Your whole outlook and sense of what's important and what needs to be done will be shaped and fashioned through your spiritual insight, not your natural eyesight. this is a challenge. But it is a challenge that you are ready for. It is a challenge that I am pleased to support you in. It is a challenge that I am pleased to support your supporting each other in. And as you continue to support yourself and each other in it, it becomes less of a challenge. I love you. I love you all. Love yourself, love each other, and understand that whenever I instruct you to love, I mean all of the above simultaneously. So breathe that in for me. How many of you had a chance to take a look at that letter? Good. Part of the reason why I want to start there is that I don't want people to get overwhelmed with facts, statistics, data, information, the news. It can feel like there's a whole lot that we have to grasp, and that there's a whole lot that we have to understand. But there really isn't that much that we have to understand. The only thing that we really have to understand is our oneness with the divine. Our oneness with the divine. If we start with that as the premise, then everything else falls out of that. Sometimes I use the analogy that comes up in the spirit letters of a mathematical equation. So in algebra, if you have an equation, you cannot solve an equation with all variables. There has to be a constant somewhere. Something has to be given somewhere, because you can't solve a problem without a variable somewhere. And what most of us tend to do is we make the problems the constants. We start with the problems as immutable. The problems is the given. And then we make spirituality the variable. Well, given this problem, maybe this other thing can happen, or perhaps this can't, or maybe God will show up, or maybe it might work out. But it's the other way around. When we start with spirit as the given, there's only one of us here is the given. It is a friendly universe as the given. That God is as the beginning, the given, the premise, then the problems become variable. What becomes if I coulda, woulda, shoulda changing is not the spirituality, but the facts and the problem. Does it make sense? We got it the wrong way. We start with the problem as the given. That's our premise. That's our starting point. You know, given this racism, given this cancer, given this financial situation, given this, given that, and then trying to figure out how spirit can work its way in and through all of that. And don't let those things stack up so it feels like we have a whole bunch of them. Then God becomes like a needle in a haystack. Where's God in all this mess? I'm looking for God in all this mess. It's the other way around. Everything is happening within the infinite. Everything is happening within God. That's the given. And when we start with that, it's not where is God within this mess? How does this stuff fit within divine design? Now, where's God in this mess? But there's only God. So whatever's going on in here is part of something much bigger. And how can I quit fixating on this one thing and relax and know that what will be revealed is revealed in due time? But in the meantime, where the seeds of my consciousness is always on this divine order and this right action. What difference would it make in your life if you were to start with this perspective and not the perspective that we normally start with. What difference would that make?
Huge.
Let's have a couple of examples. How do you think your life would be different? Just move the whole tripod.
Well,
Give us your name.
my name's Barbara.
Mhm.
Given that what we pay attention to, we get more of, if I choose to pay attention to the bigger picture of what's really going on, from the spiritual truth perspective, then I'm going to get more resources, more power, more guidance, more wisdom to deal with this little glitch on the screen.
Yes, exactly.
And it'll take the power that can generate worry, doubt, fear, contraction, separation, and all of that, that will become less
Yes,
in the bigger picture.
yes, exactly. Now, here's what we need to understand in this notion about starting something with the premise and about being self-evident. That if we look at mathematics, for example, we have all kinds of theorems and axioms and postulates and all this kind of stuff. But our mathematics is based upon one underlying premise. 1 + 1 = 2. That cannot be proven. You cannot prove 1 + 1 = 2. But if you accept that 1 + 1 = 2, then there's no mathematics that you can't do. Everything falls from that basic premise, but it is a premise that we all have to agree on as a starting point. But you can't prove it. So part of what this letter is saying is that you have to start with there's only one of us here as a premise. You can't prove it. But if you start with that as a premise, everything else can be proven. But we're busy trying to prove God. We're like, we're like starting with our problems as the thing that's real, and then making our concept of spirituality or whatnot jump through all these different hoops to see if it's real or not. But just like in the Declaration of Independence, about we hold these truths to be self-evident. This is the same idea of a mathematical premise. When a truth is quote unquote self-evident, I don't have to prove it. How much of our life is taking up trying to prove things that are really actually self-evident? How much of our life is taken up trying to validate our existence or our authenticity or our goodness, which is a self-evident fact that we cannot prove? We're busy trying to prove the wrong things. We're starting with the man-made stuff as the given and making the spiritual stuff the variable when it's the other way around. Now, part of the importance of us understanding this is the tricky part here. It's a slippery slope about how do we define what's self-evident. Okay. Just as we had been looking at the Dred Scott decision and the Constitution and the Emancipation Proclamation and the 13th Amendment and all these things, they were holding forth the norms of what has always been as the evidence of what is self-evident. So listen to this. It's a dilemma here. If the appearances And the way that human behavior has always acted to your knowledge is the evidence of truth. You're already breathing, that you can feel where I'm going. If that is the evidence of truth, then there are unexamined assumptions. Then there's no challenging that. It's like, of course that's the truth, because that's the way it's always been. This group has always been above this group. This group has always done this role. This group has always been treated this way. This group has always been the leader or the head. Of course, it's what's natural because this is the way that it's always been, hence self-evident. Are you with me? Yeah, it's an indisputable fact because that's the way that it's always been. Now, once you get into this self-evidence about these indisputable facts, just like with mathematics, there can be no exceptions. 1 + 1 has to equal 2 everywhere. If there is one spot on the globe that even for 5 minutes, 1 + 1 does not equal 2, all of mathematics falls apart. Based on a 1 + 1 = 2 that actually cannot be proven. So this is the dilemma that we find ourselves in around these issues of oppression and supremacy and all of the rest of that, is we have created a societal version of 1 + 1 = 2 and built everything around that and are too afraid to move off of that because our whole system and world will fall down as we know it because it's all built upon that. Breathe it in. So if you take something, for example, like the marriage equality laws that we've been up against, and for whom male and female equals marriage is just the 1 + 1 = 2 of life. They have no proof for it, other than the fact that it has always been. So to disrupt that in any way, shape, or form is not about the individual couples. It's not about the rights of these same-sex couples. It's not about anybody in particular. The people who are fighting against stuff like that are fighting for, like, mathematics itself. They are fighting for the whole entire, like, social order of the universe, period. Are you with me?
Yes.
We need to have some compassion for this. You know, we keep making it about individuals or this group or just they're homophobic or they just like hate. A lot of times they don't even care. They don't care about these particular groups. They don't care about their behavior. They, you know, it's not like they want to discriminate in their minds against anybody. But it would be like, not on my watch. Like us environmentalists want to say, I'm not going to let the earth blow up because of environmental degradation on my watch. And people feeling the same thing, like, I'm not going to let the fundamental premise of society and family, the way that it's been all throughout history, go down on my watch. That I'm going to be held accountable at some, whether it's pearly gates or evolution. I mean, even if you don't like believe in God, but like at some point, there's going to be a reckoning of this thousands of years later. And I don't want the history books to point back and say, bam, right there. That's where the crack happened. That's where it all went down. And these people sold out humanity down the street. I'm getting an image now. I've seen different versions of it where it's like a postcard, and it has the evolution of humanity and all these different forms, you know, like the Neanderthal and the Neanderthal and the caveman, and then they're all going in one direction and looking more and more like a human. And then you have one like that looks more like a human facing these people and saying, turn around, turn around. We messed everything up. We got it all wrong. So we have this challenge here, okay, upon what really is the nature of the self-evident truth. And the premise that we are standing on is the oneness. So if your 1 + 1 = 2 is built on hierarchy, is built on supremacy, would not exist if there were not a bunch of laws and violence and military intervention and whatnot to preserve that as the way that it is, then that ain't inherently the truth. That if it is somehow contrived, cooked up, can fall apart without it being monitored and policed, that if you have to force it into existence, it may be the norm, but it's not what's fundamentally natural. Yeah, between the norm and what's natural.
My name's Kaylee, and I've been giving this a lot of thought lately. That I have a friend here at Inner Light who's come up with 3 core principles of her life, and one of them is acceptance. And I get a lot of quotes on Twitter, and I got one today that's saying, it is the way it is because it's the way it is meant to be. And I cannot buy either one of those things.
No.
Because if the basic premise, the 1 + 1 = 2, is off, am I just supposed to sit here and mute?
No.
I don't think we're meant to be sit here mute and just say, your job is to accept it. That's how they keep us in prison. That's how they keep us quiet and malleable. And I just think this whole thing of acceptance is, you have to really look at it closely, because if the 1 + 1 isn't correct, then we shouldn't be accepting things the way they are.
Exactly. And that's what we're here to do. We are challenging, it's 3 pieces. It's 3 pieces. I'll go over that in a second. But it is, we are here to challenge some of the 1 + 1 = 2. That's what we're here to do. We're here to go back to the oneness and say that if there is anything that is built other than the fact that we are all equal and valued in the eyes of God equally, then you're standing on the wrong 1 + 1 = 2. That's why this time that we are in right now, I refer to it oftentimes as the Copernican moment. You know, Copernicus was that one who came around and said that the sun is not revolving around the earth. Now, ironically enough, Copernicus was hired by the Roman Catholic Church, and they wanted him to plot out this stuff around the stars and whatnot so that they could legitimize when they were putting Easter and when they were putting Christmas and the rest of these kinds of things. And in his studies, he comes out and says, you know what? We got it all wrong. We got it all wrong. Can you imagine how monumental this was? To say that the earth is not the center of the universe. Or what a moment it was to say, you know what? Human beings are primates. That we have evolved from the other mammal species. I mean, this is, whoo, this is huge. And for us to come up now and to say that there is no inherent racial supremacy, there is no inherent sex supremacy, there is no inherent sexual orientation supremacy, I can go on and on. This is revolutionary. And I'm going to pass out some stuff now that we're going to go over to see not only how revolutionary it is, but how fresh this is. Because we think of stuff as dead history and old history, like why are they talking about slavery and all the rest of that? But we're going to see how this stuff is alive and well today, and what it's going to take for us to shift that 1 + 1 = 2, and what our real responsibilities are within it. So are there questions about what I've said so far? Anybody online or in here? Okay. Russell?
Yeah, my name is Russell, and it feels like the triangle, that we create a judgment, an egoic judgment, where we get to be right. You know, and then we create that our supremacy. They're not true.
Yes.
If we go just the opposite way, and we go under the assumption that God is all there is, that's my unproven, God is all there is, and God is good all the time. And cancer has to be good, war has to be good. I just don't, I'm not seeing that, and I'm not seeing the God in the situation, or the situation in God, then I'm not seeing it correctly. God is good all the time.
Well, yeah, but here's the thing. And I like the way it puts it in the Sacred Yes, where it explains, the Spirit letter is saying, I have the seeds are mine. We often say, as you sow, we often say you reap what you sow, but that really isn't it. It's as you sow, so shall you reap. It's about the process. It's not so much a tit for tat. And the Spirit voice saying that the seeds are mine. And because the seeds are mine, that there's always a good harvest that can come from it, regardless of how you have sown it. If we take, for example, rape. A baby's a baby's a baby. The goodness of that which is created, that baby is not under the yoke. We haven't always believed that, but the baby is not under the yoke of its conception. It doesn't matter how the baby got here. The baby itself, because the baby comes from the seeds of God's life, there's always a good harvest that can come out of even the way we might have taken those seeds and planted them illy. So it's not to say that everything that's going on now is what ought to be going on. It's just saying that it's not wrong because it is the direct result out of certain kind of consciousness. So we should get off of this. It depends on how we define this shouldn't be happening. If we say that it shouldn't be happening because it has no reason why it should be happening, then we're off. Okay? It is happening for a reason. It's happening because there's consciousness that put it in motion. Now, should it be happening because it's the highest and the best? No. It shouldn't be happening because it's the highest and the best, but there's not something off that it's happening because we got off. We planted seeds that are off, so this is the fruit of that. Does it have to stay that way? No. So we're going to go a little further right now. I want to put on, we're going to put on the screen from Wikipedia. Can you upload that, please? And those of you who are here, you have it. It's the one that has a little colored map on it. And you'll understand in a moment why I want to use this. So, I guess there's nothing we can do about that. The people are right on top of.
Yeah, I can put them away.
Okay. So, actually, you don't need that. You can leave that because you have it in your hands.
I emailed them. I emailed you, and then it had the website for you to click on. Got
Okay.
it.
So,
That worked out.
all right, good. And I don't know if you need to move them on the screen so that whatever they're seeing from us isn't covering that map. I don't know if that's possible.
I'm working on that.
Okay. So, what you have here is a graph of the United States. And it's color-coded along the lines of laws against interracial marriages and when these bans were lifted. So in the pale area, there were no laws that ever existed banning interracial marriages. Okay? And that includes, you'll see there on the bottom there, Alaska and the Hawaiian Islands. They never had such laws. And there's a handout that we'll go over at the end of this. There are 8 states that never had any bans. There were 11 states that repealed the laws against certain interracial marriages before 1887. So this is before we got deep off into Jim Crow, towards the end of Reconstruction. There were 11 states that had already shifted their minds, and those are the ones that are in green. So from 1887 to 1948, there were no changes. So besides those states that were green or gray, every state in the United States had a ban against interracial marriage. And I'm going to stop saying interracial marriage because I'm going to be very specific that you'll see here. A ban against white people marrying outside the white race. Yes.
Did they include indigenous people?
You'll see. Bans against white people marrying outside the white race. This is up until 1948. My parents married in 1947. That gives you some kind of context. So when my parents married, there were all these bans. Now, the ones in yellow is when the bans started to be lifted. There were 14 states between 1948 and 1967 that started lifting the bans and letting white people marry people that weren't white. California led the way. We were the first to lift the ban in this next slew of things here in 1948. Interestingly enough, in 1948, we were also the first state to lift the bans against racial segregation in schools. We have this idea that everything's just about the South, but it's not about the South. This was the state of the nation, everywhere. The ones in red lifted the bans after June 12th of 1967. So what happened in June 12th, 1967, and if you go to the last handout that you have there, and I'm just switching back before, towards the yellow and down at the end. In 1967, the Supreme Court ruled against bans preventing interracial marriages in a case called Loving versus Virginia. Now, in this case, Richard Loving, a white man, served a year in prison for marrying his black wife, Mildred. And when he got out of prison, he sued. Now, you know, it takes a minute before stuff gets to the Supreme Court. So the Supreme Court ruled in 1967 that this was illegal. So after 1967, all of the states that still had bans against this had to change their laws. Those are the red states. What do you notice about the red and the yellow? This dominance. What do you notice?
Geographical.
They're geographical. They're clustered together. Okay?
So it's less than Hawaii.
They're clustered together, but they weren't really states. I mean, it took a long time for them to be states. They aren't part of the like American history thing. They got added on later on. It's basically the continental states. Okay? So you see here, and then you see the green. Notice very specifically.
It's like a border.
Exactly. Exactly. The green is like this border between the yellow and the red. This shows our political system so much, like right here. Right here. The North was either yellow and green or didn't have the laws to begin with. Okay, you didn't find a lot of red up there. Are you with me? But you can look at this. When Obama was elected, there was a graph. It blew my mind. It was the exact overlay of the 1850 slave states and free states in terms of like who voted what. It was just astounding. Okay? So, you know, we've been going through this stuff as like American history. But what I'm trying to show you is that this isn't dead history.
No, when I was just pulling these up and printing them out for you, it like dawned on me, it's like, I thought of, you know, gay marriage.
I'm going
And
there.
I thought, no wonder it's such an issue. These people took this stuff seriously.
Yes.
It's like, this is what we're founded on, is controlling who marries who.
Yeah, and they got forced into it.
Right.
See,
Yeah.
remember the isms. Remember the isms. Remember the isms had two components. There's the prejudice, there's the prejudice, there's the bias, and then there's the institutionalization of it. Okay? Just because you changed the laws and the institutionalization of it, it does not change the bias. It doesn't change the bias.
We have a right to tell people who marries who.
Not just we have a right, okay? But that the 1+1 of society requires that it be this way. Okay? It's not the sense of trying to control people's choices, because that would mean there had to be a choice.
Okay.
There is no choice.
It's self-evident.
It is self-evident. Okay? And yes, you hit it right on the head. You hit it right on the head. The marriage equality laws are piggybacking off of, they are built on the precedent of the fall of the bans against marriages across races. This is a fresh new wound. This is only 1967. These folks have not changed their mind. They haven't changed their mind. They have been forced into shifting the laws, but they have not changed their mind. Are you with me? So there's all this salt in the wound when you look at the pushback, when you look at all this language about the nostalgia of like bringing America back, you begin to see the magnitude of the shifts and the changes. Now, we'll go over it next week, I still want to stick with this, but just as over next week, we'll talk about the sodomy laws, where the sodomy laws are about sexual practice. And it's a similar kind of thing where there was a case in 2003 that knocked the sodomy laws down, or at least the Supreme Court overturned them in Lawrence versus Texas. But to date, a dozen states refused to take their sodomy laws off the books. They have not taken them off the books. And it's the same kind of red configuration thing that's going on here in terms of consciousness. Are you with me? So let's look at the next website. Okay? And this is the next handout that has the graphs and charts on it. Okay, now part of the reason why I printed this one out, and it goes 2 pages, is it breaks it down. It breaks it down state by state, when the laws were first passed. So you have a chance to see how random this is and how it's not like just one thing, one time. They are randomly coming up and they are randomly coming down. Okay, for various reasons, but there's inconsistency all over the land about what you can and cannot do where. Not unlike where we just came out of marriage equality. Depending upon what state you were in, determined whether or not you were actually married or not. And once you crossed a state line, you weren't married. So you could be married in California, you cross the line to Arizona, you're not even related. Don't get in an accident in Arizona, because you could not be next of kin to say, you know, what happened in the case of an accident or anything else. This hodgepodge all over the place.
This is a requirement in another state. California got the law in 1850 when the year became a state.
You're kind of on something here.
I know
it's related. It's let's put it this, it's highly correlated, but not causative. Is what they would say in statistics, that it is connected, but it's not the causation. And what Russell's referring to is that before a state could get ratified as a state, it had to have so many white people in the state. And until you had that many white people, you couldn't be a state. Native Americans did not count. Indigenous peoples did not count, as we talked about earlier in the original articles of the Constitution, where if you were free or going to be free, so if you were white free and an indentured servant white, but one day going to be free, you counted as one. If you were native, you counted as nothing. If you were persons, other persons, meant those who were never going to be free, census count, you were counted 3/5. But you wouldn't have been able to go into that territory on your own anyway. So it would have been, if white people started to move into that state with their slaves, that would have upped the census count as to quote unquote how many white people were actually in the state. So when the land was given out, when the millions of acres that the US government stole, can you put it on me? When the millions of acres were being stolen and given away, only white people could qualify. And the wagon trains coming west and the homesteading, and that's how most white people in America became property owners, was the United States giving them the land. The wagon trains and all of that they just squatted on the land, and just by being on it, you got to have it. But black people, any other races were not allowed the land in the homesteading. It was only the white people. So when you look at this list, So I want you to flip back to that page again. When you look at these laws, okay, you see something very consistent. It says races banned from marrying whites. Blacks is on all of them. On every last one of them. And then depending upon the state that you were in, sometimes it just said all 9 whites, like Georgia, South Carolina, Virginia, you know, just period, end of report. Sometimes it was against Asians, sometimes it was against Filipinos or Native Americans.
Not Hispanics.
Well, that's because the concept of Hispanic is new. According to census, up until very recently, they were considered white. And they fought hard to not be considered white to get their numbers counted in the census. So ironically enough, when I said that California was the first one to ban this thing is interracial state, ban against interracial couples, ironically enough, the woman who sued was actually Mexican American. She was Mexican American who wanted to marry a black guy. They were in El Segundo in Los Angeles area in aerospace together. They were colleagues that worked together, but she was classified as white. But technically speaking, you know, for our purposes today, she was actually Mexican American. So the piece that I really want to bring to you here, that's the insidious piece about this, is that it's defined here as races banned from marrying whites. There's a construct here. Okay, put it back on me. There's a construct here that is insidious. This is the okey doke. We've been bamboozled. This isn't the races banned from marrying whites.
Whites are being married.
Yes, say it again.
Keeping whites
Say
not
it, say
marrying.
it, say it.
Whites not marrying other races. To
Yes.
keep the white race pure.
This is the list to white people of who you can marry and who you can't marry. The black woman didn't get thrown into prison.
No.
The white man got thrown into prison. Okay, I really want you've got to get where I'm going here with this. Is it we think about oppression and discrimination as being what happens to the oppressed people or to the quote unquote minority group. We make it about them. Like they're right. Do they have the right? Like there's something about these groups that's so inferior that they're being banned from marrying the white people because they aren't quite good enough to be able to marry the white people. This is the same way the Jim Crow laws are in everything else. The only way that you can keep black people from marrying white people is you got to stop the white people from marrying the black people. Does this make sense? The only way you can have, say, employment discrimination, the only way you can have it such that the black people aren't getting hired means that all the white people have to collude together and enforce that. So it isn't really so much just laws about where black people can work or not work. It is, this is due notice to white employers of who you can hire or not hire, who you can sell your house to. So my house, my family house, has in its covenants, conditions, and restrictions a clause that says you cannot sell this house to colored people. The house was built in 22, the year my dad was born. That can never be taken out. It can't be enforced. but it can never be taken out. Okay? So I want you to really catch where I'm going here. That the racism and the oppression, not only does it impact everybody, but the only way you can keep it is that the white people have to participate in it. Complicitly, however you want to slice it, dice it, but then they wind up being hurt. So for every black person that doesn't get the job, that's an employee, a skilled employee that white person can't use. Everybody gets oppressed. Everybody gets oppressed. But it's put here as racist ban for marrying whites. But that thinking, of course it's how it's always worded, but that's not really what it is. What it should have said is whites were banned. But white people don't want to think that they're restricted.
Yeah, that's why it's worded that way.
See,
So
white
this
people,
makes it look like they're being protected.
there you go.
Yeah.
Bingo. We're being protected. Because we're controlling these other people.
Right.
And their behavior. Oh, it can't look like there's any restrictions on us. It can't look, we're the land of the free. We're the land of the free. But if we cross the line on any of these, if we do any of these things with any of these people who we say shouldn't be able to do it with us, guess what happens?
We're punished.
We're punished. And how are we punished? What's the punishment?
Stigmatized.
Whatever those other people are, you join them. You give up your entitlement. You give up your privilege of being white.
It's mostly in the South.
It's not just the South.
No, I'm just saying, that's what a lot of people think. It's most,
Oh yeah.
a lot of people think it's mostly in the South, but it's spread all over the United States. But most people you talk to, them, they'll say it's mostly in the South.
Yes.
It's not mostly in the South.
Yeah, whenever somebody's talking.
Yeah.
So, but this isn't just about race.
Right.
I'm talking about power dynamics, and I'm talking about the way that oppression works. Is it the way you keep it going and the way that you keep people in line? Is it the price you pay for being an advocate? The price that you pay for leveling the playing field? The price that you pay for speaking up is you get marginalized and you lose the privilege of your supreme status. And you get thrown into the bunch with the rest of them. So if blacks aren't being hired, you aren't going to get hired. If blacks are having crosses burned on burned on their lawn, you get one, on your lawn. It's like whatever that is happening, it is the same with anything. If anything, if the issue is about sexual orientation, this is part of the problem that we've had in that. It isn't that all these heterosexual people are necessarily homophobic, but because you can't tell who people are by how they look, there is this concern on the part of heterosexual people. If I stand up too much for gay rights, people are going to think I'm gay. If I'm seen too much with these gay people or hanging out with them at their clubs, they're going to think I'm gay. And it's like, woo, then I'm going to forego my heterosexual privilege. And I'm going to be treated like them. And it's like, heaven forbid. So much of the silence that happens, so much of the complicity, so much of the keeping things the way that they are is not necessarily because of people's heart space. It is not necessarily because they believe it, but because they are oppressed by the same machinery that is oppressing the ones in the minority position. Beaten with the same whip, beaten with the same laws, but it's just decorated to make it seem like they're not being restricted, they're not being held back, they're being protected. They're being protected. breathe this in. This is our lifetime.
Yes.
This is not old history. This is what's going on now, where everything in America has been racialized. Everything. Where you live, where you can go to school, if you can get a job, who you can marry, what kind of health care you can get, where you can live. There is not a single aspect of American life that has not been racialized.
Elizabeth says, not just in America.
Oh no! Oh no! It's the same. It's the same crap that's been exported everywhere. Okay. So breathe. I'm going to let some of the people in who are online. Elizabeth, did you want to say something? Besides, this is crazy.
Oh my God. It all makes sense, and oh my God, it has to end now.
Yeah.
This bullshit has been going on for way too long.
Yes. Yes.
And for what good? There is nothing good coming out of this.
Well, the good news. Why were we banning interracial marriage?
Huh?
What was the point of banning interracial?
Preserve the white.
Keep the white.
How are you going to preserve the white race?
No children.
No children. It's the children. That's what people were afraid of. The mixed race children. Why? Because you have, in order to keep the isms, you have to have the groups separate. They have to be mutually exclusive. And we constructed the whole construct of race around this notion of the white purity. Of the white purity. So the only way that we can make certain that your kids are going to stay white and be white. Yes. Now, I don't know the origins of it, but I do think it's interesting. There's something similar in Judaism, where the line of Judaism is through the mother. And it becomes a very neat way to keep everybody in check.
Because you always know who the mother is.
Because you don't have Jewish men marrying outside of Judaism because their kids won't be Jews. Then you don't have non-Jewish men hooking up with Jewish women because their kids will be Jews. And it becomes this very interesting way of preserving something. Kelly's trying to say something.
It's really simple by Jewish law. You're a Jew if your mother was Jewish, because you always know who the mother is.
Well, yeah.
And there's something to laugh about in that one. You always know who the mother is.
You always know who the mother is, but when you look at the politics that's behind it and up under it, how does that mother be defined as Jewish?
That's her mother.
But the only way that her mother could be is if you kept reinforcing this.
Right.
It's just like, why is Barack Obama black? It's the same kind of thing. It's like, where does the definition come of when somebody's a Jew or not a Jew when there's been a lot of intermingling? It's like, what happens then? What happens then? Somebody else on the...
Ade, are you ready? No, he's going to get on the phone. He's getting on his phone and then he wants to talk.
Okay. All right, wave your hand when you're on the phone. Anybody else on the phone that wants to chime in? Take yourself off mute. Okay, Sade's ready. Valerie Hayes, did you want to say anything?
There he is.
After him?
You know, I'll be honest, I don't know what to say. I got here just about 10 minutes ago.
Okay, it's good.
So give me, yeah, I need a minute.
I didn't want to ignore you.
No, you're not.
Okay. Ade, are you there? Anybody else on the phone? Want to unmute?
I am.
Okay.
Okay, let me unmute myself.
Ade? Oh, just muted himself again.
Unmute yourself.
Okay, you can. Great. Okay. What I wanted to say is, I put in the chat room, I said, we're here to remind ourselves and humanity that 1 + 1 = 1, not 2. And the thing is, sometimes it's very easy to think they have to see that 1 + 1 = 1. But the truth is, I have to see that 1 + 1 = 1. Because this oneness thing is this conversation we're having is not just about race, married. It's for me, I see it as the consciousness of humanity. So we correct it by correcting how we see the world, because we can't go to somebody and tell them, well, you need to understand that 1 + 1 = 1, because it's about oneness, and we're not trying to see their point of view. And so I feel like, you know, the work is internal work, and it would naturally spill out. And as you shared, Rev D, in one of the calls, that something about, I'm paraphrasing, when you say we can't meet face to face with somebody if we have a judgment about their way of being.
Yes.
We have to face our own selves and look at where we're judging them so that we can really meet. So what we're looking at here is really a reflection of the consciousness of humanity.
Yes.
And we got to do the work individually. So that way it will spill out. Because there are probably some people meeting on a call doing a training about the importance of being separate. And they're listening and saying, yeah, that's right. And they have statistics to back it up. Yeah. So until we do our inner work, not until, but you know what I mean? It's like, it's just as important that we start to deactivate the isms in our own lives with ourselves and our loved ones. Then we can plant that in the world, if you will.
Exactly. Thank you. I want you to pay attention to the one that has the charts on it, the graphs on it, in the center of the first page. Remember, the ones in red said they have changed their laws since 1967. It doesn't mean that they automatically changed it. See, when the Supreme Court rules that something is unconstitutional, that means that those laws in those other states theoretically should not be enforced. But they have to actually go in and change their laws. It doesn't actually fall off the books. They actually have to go in and change their laws. So the very last state to let go of the bans in interracial marriage was Alabama. In November of 2000. In November of 2000. And look at the vote.
Wow.
40% said no. 40%, but just look at that. 40% said no in 2000. So this red here, don't think it just jumped up and started happening in 1967. It's that because of the ruling, the changes, but some of these changes, most of these states are really, really recent. So can you imagine now, you've got a state that just started to let white people marry somebody other than white, and then you're talking about 2 men? Holy Jesus. No, I'm really serious. So this sense of attack, this sense of the world going to hell, this sense of who's controlling the nation now and what is their agenda, and pushing all these unnatural, things on us, and, mongrelizing the races, and oh my God, and the fall of the family. But It is
And you don't-
serious.
You don't hear that much out here. You do with the you don't hear too much out here. You just go in the South and listen to some of the Christian radio TV show. Thank God my mom don't understand half the thing what they're saying, because they're more, now you talking about really against racial and intermarriage, same-sex marriage. You go there and you listen to those Christians, so-called Christians, getting all the money on these shows, on the TVs and stuff. So lucky mom just liked to sing. My mom was a singer, and lucky she loved to sing. And I said, Mom, whatever you do, don't write no checks. I got my sister. I got all the checks from her, and took them all to my sisters, because that's what they advocate, and that's what they're saying. That's when they had so much of a fight in this southern state that about interracial marriage and also sexual marriage, is because those Christian stations, white and black, are on this thing. That's when they fight so hard. That's when they have holding up the legislation so hard to get these. You just it'll blow your mind.
Yes.
It'll really blow your mind.
Yes. So there's a fundamental. What's on now is so fundamental. Okay? This thing that we're doing now is for such a time as this, so that we can really get a better understanding. We need to get out of La La Land about this being the land of the free and everything's equal and blah, blah, blah. It is not. We've got work we got to do. We got to push up the sleeves. And this stuff about I don't see color and I don't see this, it is not helpful. It is not helpful. This is not just about race. Okay? This is about like consciousness and a particular purview and a particular view. And then what do? So let's just say you are an interracial couple, or you want to marry somebody outside your race, and you live in the red states. Where do you go? What do you do? Yeah, you either just stay together or you move. So there's no mistake that the consciousness is sort of polarized geographically, because people of different minds and different consciousness have moved into areas where there's less legal restrictions from them, being who they want to be or doing what they want to do. Like I said, the state of Louisiana paying for my mom and all my family to go to USC to get their education rather than go to LSU. And they were smart because they knew these folks weren't coming back. They got their graduate degrees, in California, get them uppity Negroes out of here. And it worked. So keeping these laws in place was also a way to kind of move people around, self-regulate. There you go. A couple more comments and then we got to close because we've run over.
I'm Barbara, and I had a direct experience with this because in 1994, I became partners with a black man. Now, I think looking at all this yellow over here can be misleading.
Oh, that's true.
Because I lost the privilege of having a relationship with my father. He was Scottish, British Columbian, Scottish Canadian. And when he found out that I was with a black man, he disowned me and refused to see me, refused to talk to me. And it put my mom in a real difficult position because she holds racist beliefs too, but she's not as bigoted as my dad. At least she wasn't as out front about it as my dad was. So she was caught in the middle because she wanted to have a relationship with her daughter, and her only child, her daughter, and yet she didn't want to have conflict and separation from my father. So she was put through hell too. Everybody was put through hell because of this. And I don't think that I'm the only one in these yellow states here that have gone through this kind of a thing.
Oh, no, no, no. No, and thank you for bringing that up, because so let's be really clear. The isms have two components. There's the bias, there's the prejudice, and there's the institutionalization. But just because laws change doesn't mean the biases change or that the prejudices change. It just means that legally speaking, it's possible for you to marry a black man, but will you pay the same price as if you were in the red state? Yes. You know, you might end up forfeiting the same privileges and all the rest of that. That's why it's two ends. We get this idea, okay, oh, we got marriage equality now. So what? We're still up against we're still up against the mindset from thousands of years that we still have to work through and, you know, and undo and all of the rest of that. We have to be present with it. And I'm putting these things out here not as judgment, but just like a barometer of the wind. It's like, this is where we are, like in this nation, and particularly to see that racism or any ism isn't just about how the other people are mistreated or discriminated against. It's how the laws are set up to protect supremacy, and those that it's trying to protect must also be restricted. Their freedoms must also be curtailed in order for it to be carried out. You just don't know it. Because if you don't see race, then you don't see you're white. It's like if you don't see they're black, you don't see you're white. Then you can't see all of the laws and stuff that are restricting you as a white person because you don't see it. You can't help me, then you can't help your own group because we're all caught up in it. But if we're blind, we can't do anything.
So I'm Milo, and I wanted to say about the Jewish law about inheritance through the mother. It was a little more insidious than that because women didn't have any right to petition the rabbi. They could not renounce their Judaism. So once you were Jewish, you were stuck, and there was nothing you could do, and you couldn't even talk to the rabbi because you were a woman. So it was really a way to cement in that supremacy.
As women as chattel.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And also
it's the branding.
in the Talmud too.
All these laws that have restricted us have been by white males. There's Congresses and senators and all the Supreme Court justices on the Dred Scott were white males who decided, and their decision that blacks were inferior. There was no blacks at hell. It's always been white males that have been dominating this cycle of abuse.
This is true. But it's all reinforcing. It's all reinforcing with this idea that God's a white male.
Yes. Yes.
That it's, when you said, Russell, that it's on the triangle, the victim, villain, hero triangle. Well, when you're in this supremacist model, you get to be the hero. Okay? But if you're the hero, then you got to have something to say. So you get this twisted stuff in your mind. You're saving all the savages. You're saving all the heathens, and you're actually improving their life by exporting them and exposing them to your God. I mean, there's all this kind of twisted way to, because if you're the hero, there's got to be a villain. Then who is it we're fighting? Who's this attacking us? Who are we up against? We need to get off of it. We need to get off of it. I know this was, I realize that a lot of this stuff is hard, but it's the stuff we don't look at, the stuff we don't pay attention to, and I try to give it to you like in black and white. So you can, yeah, literally like in black and white, so you can see it and we can all have a little more compassion and a little deeper understanding about what's in front of us. This notion of oneness is not a shared belief. We're having to start from the bottom.
Yeah.
We're having to start from the bottom in rebuilding, not rebuilding, in building this beloved community. But we're up for the task of being architects for such a time as this. Yes. All right, so let's stand. And I think we're going to do, there's a healing going on.
Yes, what I'm feeling.
That's what I'm thinking. Okay, Mother, Father, God, there's a healing going on.
Yeah.
Oh, you rock my soul. Mother, Father, God, there's a healing going on. Mother, Father, God, there's a healing going on. Mother, Father, God, there's a healing going on. I said, oh, you rock my soul. I said, oh, you rock my soul. One more time, there's a healing going on. Mother, Father, God, there's a healing going on. Mother, Father, God, there's a healing going on. Mother, Father, God, there's a healing going on. I said, oh, you rock my soul. I said, oh, you rock my soul. One last rock. I said, oh, rock my soul. Amen, amen, amen. Now, your assignment for this week is, how deep in your heart can you go into forgiveness?
Yes. Yes.